good morning, afternoon. Let's talk about something we all know too well, the silence between two people who once shared a connection. Whether it's between friends, lovers, or even family members, the absence of contact speaks volumes. But it doesn't always say what we think it does. Silence between two people is more than just the absence of words or actions. It is a powerful reflection of the internal landscapes we often try to avoid. When a man and a woman do not contact each other, that silence can reveal truths about their relationship, their individual emotional states, and the unspoken dynamics that exist between them. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. The mirror doesn't lie, it shows you exactly what's there, whether you like it or not. Silence works the same way. It forces us to confront what's within us, our fears, insecurities, hopes, and even our regrets. 1. Silence reveals emotional patterns. In the stillness, we might notice patterns in ourselves. Do you feel anger rising because they haven't reached out? Do you feel sadness or rejection because you expected them to care more? Do you feel relief as if their absence is giving you a sense of freedom? These emotions are not just about the other person, they are about you. Silence reflects what's happening in your heart and mind. It's an opportunity to pause and ask, why am I feeling this way? 2. Silence highlights assumptions. Often, when someone doesn't contact us, we assume we know why. They don't care about me. I must have upset them. They're too busy for me. But these assumptions are projections of our own fears and insecurities. They reveal more about how we perceive ourselves and less about the other person's actual intentions. The silence then becomes a mirror for the stories we create. It's a chance to separate fact from fiction and challenge the narratives we carry. 3. Silence reflects your priorities. When there's no contact, it also reveals what truly matters to you. If the silence feels unbearable, it might mean that the relationship holds deep significance for you. On the other hand, if the silence feels like a relief, it could signal that the connection was draining or misaligned with your needs. Either way, the absence of contact serves as a moment of clarity, a reflection of what you value and what you're willing to fight for or let go of. 4. Silence invites self-reflection. In relationships, we often focus on the actions or inactions of the other person, but silence invites us to turn inward. Are you holding on to unresolved feelings of hurt or anger? Are you expecting them to fulfill needs you could fulfill for yourself? Are you truly open to reconnection, or are you clinging to something that no longer serves you? These are hard questions, but they're necessary ones. Silence offers us a chance to understand ourselves better before we decide whether to reach out or to let the silence linger. 5. Silence shows the strength of the bond. In some cases, silence can reveal the resilience of a relationship. If the connection is strong, the silence may feel temporary, like a pause rather than an ending. On the other hand, if the bond is weak or based on superficial ties, silence may be the beginning of a natural dissolution. Either way, it reflects the current state of the relationship and offers clarity on what's next. Silence, like a mirror, doesn't lie, but it also doesn't judge. It simply shows us what is. The challenge is to look at it with honesty and courage. When we do, we can use the stillness to grow, to heal, and to decide whether it's time to break the silence or to embrace it as a part of our journey forward. In the end, silence isn't the absence of connection, it's the space where we discover what connection truly means to us. When two people stop communicating, the silence that follows can feel like a vacuum. And as human beings, we are wired to fill that void, whether with explanations, stories, or assumptions. These assumptions may not always be accurate, but they carry the weight of our fears, insecurities, and past experiences. Let's unpack how assumptions work in silence, why they can be problematic, and how we can address them in healthier ways. 1. Assumptions are emotional projections. When there is no contact, our minds start to craft narratives to explain why. These stories often reflect our deepest emotions rather than the truth of the situation. For example, if we're feeling insecure, we might assume they don't care about me. If we're feeling guilty, we might think I must have done something wrong. If we're feeling resentful, we might decide they're just being selfish. These assumptions are not about the other person, they are about us. They mirror our internal fears and anxieties. Left unchecked, they can snowball into unnecessary conflict, resentment, or feelings of rejection. 2. Assumptions lack context. The absence of contact doesn't necessarily mean something negative. The other person could be going through their own challenges like stress, work, or personal struggles that have nothing to do with you. But without communication, we lack context. Instead of recognizing this lack of information, we often fill the void with our interpretations. If they cared, they'd reach out. They're ignoring me on purpose. They've moved on and don't value me anymore. The danger here is that assumptions based on incomplete information lead us to misjudge the situation and sometimes the person. 3. Assumptions amplify negative emotions. Silence can already feel uncomfortable, but assumptions add fuel to the fire. Instead of allowing ourselves to sit with the uncertainty, we create stories that escalate our feelings of sadness, anger, or rejection. For instance, a delay in response becomes a sign of disinterest. A missed call becomes a symbol of neglect. Continued silence becomes a declaration of abandonment. These assumptions often feed into a cycle of overthinking where one imagined scenario leads to another, making it harder to approach the situation with clarity and composure. 4. Assumptions erode trust. If unchecked, assumptions can damage relationships by creating emotional barriers. Instead of trusting the other person or seeking clarity through direct communication, we rely on our own narratives. This can lead to misunderstandings that go unresolved, resentment that builds over time, a breakdown in the connection, even if the silence was never meant to be permanent. When we let assumptions dominate, we risk creating distance that might not have existed otherwise. 5. Addressing assumptions with curiosity. The antidote to assumptions is curiosity and communication. Instead of filling the void with imagined stories, we can approach the situation with openness. I haven't heard from you lately. Are you okay? I'm wondering if there's something on your mind that you'd like to share. Can we talk? I'd like to understand what's going on. These simple, honest inquiries shift the dynamic from judgment to understanding. They allow us to replace assumptions with clarity and to approach the relationship with empathy and patience. Key takeaway: assumptions are the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the silence, but they are rarely accurate or helpful. Instead of letting our minds fill the void, we can choose to hold space for uncertainty and reach out with curiosity. In doing so, we create opportunities for deeper connection, clearer communication, and a relationship built on trust rather than fear. In the end, silence doesn't have to be a blank canvas for assumptions. It can be an invitation to listen, reflect, and seek the truth. Silence is often misunderstood. While it may seem like avoidance or indifference, silence can sometimes be a deliberate act of self-preservation, a way to protect one's mental, emotional, or physical well-being. It is not about punishing the other person or avoiding responsibility. It's about creating space to heal, regroup, and find clarity in a situation that might feel overwhelming or harmful. Let's explore why silence is a form of self-preservation, what it can signify, and how it plays a vital role in maintaining healthy boundaries and personal growth. 1. Silence as a boundary. Silence can be a way of setting boundaries when words no longer suffice or when communication feels unsafe. If a relationship or situation becomes toxic, draining, or emotionally overwhelming, stepping back and choosing silence can be a powerful act of self-care. Instead of engaging in endless arguments or trying to fix something that isn't working, silence creates a protective buffer. It allows us to preserve our energy and protect ourselves from further hurt. In this sense, silence says, I need this space to prioritize my well-being. 2. Silence to process emotions. Not all silence is a withdrawal from the relationship. Sometimes it's a pause to process complex emotions. When feelings like anger, sadness, or confusion arise, stepping back can prevent us from saying things we might later regret or acting out of impulsive emotions. Silence provides the time to reflect on questions like, what am I really feeling right now? What do I need in this moment? How do I want to approach this situation moving forward? In this way, silence is not avoidance, but a conscious choice to approach the situation with greater clarity and emotional regulation. 3. Silence in the face of conflict. In the midst of conflict, silence can serve as a strategy to de-escalate tension. When conversations become heated, silence is sometimes the only way to prevent things from spiraling out of control. Walking away or staying quiet in such moments isn't a sign of weakness. It's a way of saying, I need time to think before I respond. This kind of silence doesn't mean the issue is being ignored. Instead, it's about creating the necessary distance to engage in a more constructive and respectful conversation later. 4. Silence to rediscover self. When relationships or situations consume too much of our identity, silence can be a way to rediscover who we are outside of the dynamic. Constant communication and interaction can sometimes blur our sense of self, leaving us unsure of our own needs, desires, and values. Silence gives us a chance to reconnect with ourselves, free from external influences. It allows us to ask, what do I truly want? Am I acting in alignment with my values? Is this relationship or situation nurturing me or depleting me? In this sense, silence is not about closing the door, but about stepping back to ensure we are bringing our best, most authentic selves to the table. 5. Silence is healing. In situations of deep hurt or betrayal, silence can be a necessary part of healing. Sometimes it's not possible to immediately confront the source of pain or have a meaningful conversation. Silence becomes a way to pause the cycle of hurt, allowing time and space for wounds to mend. Healing in silence doesn't mean the relationship is doomed. It means that the person needs to prioritize their own emotional recovery before they can re-engage in a healthy way. It's a reminder that we cannot pour from an empty cup. 6. Misinterpreting silence. It's important to note that silence as self-preservation can often be misunderstood. To the other person, it may appear as indifference, rejection, or even punishment. However, silence in this context is rarely about the other person. It's about the individual making a choice to prioritize their own well-being. This is why communication about the silence, if and when it feels safe, can be valuable. A simple acknowledgement like, I need some time to process things, but this doesn't mean I don't care, can help bridge understanding and reduce the risk of misinterpretation. Key takeaway. Silence as self-preservation is a courageous act. It's about recognizing when a situation or relationship is taking more than it's giving and stepping back to protect your emotional and mental health. It's not a sign of weakness or indifference, but a profound declaration of self-worth. By honoring the need for silence, we allow ourselves the space to heal, reflect, and rebuild. And when we're ready to return to the conversation or even choose to let it go, we do so from a place of strength and clarity, not from exhaustion or compromise. Rebuilding a connection after a period of silence, conflict, or separation is not an easy task. It takes courage, honesty, and a willingness to be vulnerable. Vulnerability in this context means opening yourself up to the possibility of rejection, misunderstanding, or even more hurt, all in the hope of fostering genuine understanding and repairing the relationship. Let's explore why vulnerability is at the heart of reconnection, what it demands from us, and how we can embrace it to rebuild meaningful connections. 1. Acknowledging the silence. The first step to reconnection is acknowledging the silence itself. Pretending that everything is fine or sweeping the lack of communication under the rug only creates more distance. Vulnerability requires us to name the elephant in the room and address it directly. This might sound like, I've noticed we haven't spoken in a while and I miss our conversations. It feels like there's been some distance between us and I'd like to talk about it. By acknowledging the silence, we show that we care enough to face discomfort and initiate a conversation that could lead to healing. 2. Being honest about your feelings. Reconnection requires honesty, and honesty demands vulnerability. It means being willing to share how the silence or disconnection has affected you without resorting to blame or defensiveness. For example, I've been feeling hurt because I wasn't sure why we stopped talking. I've missed having you in my life, but I wasn't sure how to reach out. When we speak openly about our emotions, we invite the other person to do the same. Vulnerability creates a safe space where both people can express their truths and begin to rebuild trust. 3. Taking responsibility. True vulnerability also means taking responsibility for your part in the silence or disconnection. This doesn't mean shouldering all the blame, but rather being willing to acknowledge your actions or inactions. For example, I realize I could have reached out sooner, but I hesitated because I wasn't sure how you'd feel. Looking back, I think I might have said something that upset you, and I want to take responsibility for that. Owning your role shows maturity and a genuine desire to repair the relationship. It also makes it easier for the other person to let down their guard and engage in honest dialogue. 4. Embracing uncertainty. Reconnection is inherently uncertain. You cannot control how the other person will respond or whether they are ready to meet you halfway. Vulnerability means stepping into this uncertainty and trying anyway. When you reach out, you risk rejection or indifference, but you also open the door to understanding, healing, and reconnection. This act of courage demonstrates your commitment to the relationship, regardless of the outcome. 5. Listening with an open heart. The vulnerability and reconnection isn't just about sharing your own feelings, it's also about being willing to listen. The other person may have their own pain, frustrations, or misunderstandings to express. Being open to hearing their perspective, even if it's hard to hear, is a vital part of the process. This requires setting aside defensiveness and truly listening. Phrases like, I hear you and I understand why you felt that way. Thank you for sharing that with me. I didn't realize how much it affected you. Acknowledging their feelings without rushing to justify your actions or defend yourself shows that you value their experience and are committed to rebuilding the connection. 6. Letting go of perfection. Vulnerability also means letting go of the need for a perfect outcome. Reconnection is rarely neat or linear. It may take time, and the relationship may never return to exactly what it was before. However, vulnerability allows you to embrace imperfection and focus on the possibility of a new and different kind of connection. It's about saying, even if this doesn't turn out exactly as I hope, I'm willing to try because this relationship matters to me. 7. Strengthening the bond through vulnerability. Ironically, the very act of being vulnerable often strengthens the bond you're trying to rebuild. When you show up authentically and allow yourself to be seen, you give the other person permission to do the same. This mutual vulnerability fosters trust, empathy, and a deeper connection. By being willing to open your heart, you demonstrate that the relationship is worth the effort. Vulnerability becomes the bridge between silence and understanding, between distance and closeness. Key takeaway: reconnection is not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about being brave enough to say, this matters to me, and I'm willing to take the first step. Vulnerability might feel risky, but it's the only way to create authentic, meaningful connections. In the end, reconnection requires more than just words. It requires a willingness to be seen, to be honest, and to show up wholeheartedly. And while it might not guarantee the outcome you hope for, it's the path that leads to the kind of relationships that truly matter. One of life's hardest truths is that not all connections are permanent. Whether it's a romantic relationship, friendship, or even a professional partnership, some connections are meant to be temporary. They enter our lives for a purpose, whether to teach us, challenge us, or accompany us through a particular chapter, and then they fade or end. Recognizing that not all connections are meant to last is not about cynicism. It's about embracing the impermanence of life and finding meaning in both the presence and the absence of those connections. Let's explore this concept in depth. 1. Connections serve different purposes. Every connection has a purpose, but not all purposes are lifelong. Some people come into our lives to teach us valuable lessons about love, resilience, trust, or even betrayal. Others offer us companionship during a specific season, like a colleague during a project or a friend during a transitional phase. When a connection ends, it doesn't mean it was meaningless. It means that its purpose has been fulfilled, and it's time to move forward. 2. Growth can create distance. As we grow and evolve, our priorities, values, and interests can change. The same happens to others. What once united two people may no longer align, creating natural distance. For example, a friend from childhood may no longer share the same lifestyle or goals. A romantic partner may no longer align with your vision for the future. This divergence doesn't make the connection less valuable. It simply means that growth has taken you on different paths, and that's okay. 3. Letting go is not failure. When a connection ends, it's easy to see it as a failure, a friendship that didn't survive, a relationship that ended, or a collaboration that dissolved. But not all endings are failures. Letting go is often an act of wisdom and love. It's recognizing when a connection has served its purpose and releasing it with gratitude rather than clinging to something that no longer serves either party. For example, ending a toxic friendship doesn't erase the good times you shared. Walking away from a relationship that's no longer fulfilling doesn't diminish the love that once existed. Letting go allows space for new connections that align with who you are now. 4. The beauty of temporary connections. There is beauty in fleeting connections. Not everything needs to last forever to have value. Sometimes a brief encounter can have a profound impact. A mentor who guides you during a critical moment in your career. A stranger whose kindness shifts your perspective on a tough day. A romantic partner who teaches you what love means, even if they're not your forever person. These moments remind us that connection is not about duration, but about depth and meaning. 5. Clinging can cause harm. Holding on to a connection that is no longer serving you can create more harm than good it can lead to. A resentment when the relationship feels forced or one-sided. Stagnation when the connection prevents personal growth. Emotional exhaustion from trying to maintain something that no longer fits. Letting go, though painful, is sometimes the most compassionate choice for yourself and for the other person. 6. Acceptance brings peace. Accepting that not all connections are meant to last brings a sense of peace. It allows you to honor the role the connection played in your life. Release feelings of guilt or regret about its ending. Appreciate the impermanence of life and the constant opportunity for renewal. Acceptance doesn't mean you forget or devalue the connection. It means you make space to cherish it for what it was without being bound by what it is no longer. 7. Connections that end create space for new ones. Every ending is also a beginning. When a connection ends, it opens up emotional and mental space for new relationships, experiences, and opportunities. It's a chance to meet people who align with your current self and values. Explore new paths and interests that might not have been possible otherwise. Or discover yourself outside the context of the old connection. This is not about replacing what's lost, but about evolving with life's natural rhythms. Key takeaway: not all connections are meant to last, and that's part of what makes them meaningful. Their impermanence teaches us to cherish them while they're here and to let them go when their time has passed. Instead of mourning every ending, we can learn to celebrate the lessons, growth, and memories each connection brought into our lives. In doing so, we honor the beauty of both the connection and the journey it helped shape. Ultimately, it's not about how long a connection lasts, it's about the impact it has while it's there. And when we embrace this truth, we find freedom in both holding on and letting go.in the end. Relationships, whether they last a moment, a season, or a lifetime, are the threads that weave the fabric of our lives. Some are strong and enduring, while others are delicate and fleeting. And that's okay. Each connection, no matter its duration, shapes who we are and how we see the world. But as we navigate the complexities of silence, reconnection, and letting go, one truth remains constant: the courage to show up, to be vulnerable, and to embrace the uncertainty of human relationships is what makes them meaningful. So whether you're reaching out to rebuild a bridge, stepping back to preserve your peace, or cherishing the memory of a connection that has run its course, remember this: every relationship is a gift, and every ending is an opportunity for growth. Let us honor the beauty of impermanence, the strength and vulnerability, and the lessons each connection leaves behind. And above all, let us choose love, kindness, and gratitude, even when the path is unclear. Because in the grand mosaic of life, it's not the permanence of our connections that matters most, it's the depth of our presence while we have them. Thank you.